Hello and welcome to the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. We bring you interviews from people who have conquered the trickiest of health challenges using the functional diagnostic nutrition philosophy and similar healing modalities. You're going to hear from experts who have been through the ringer with their health issues and yet managed to come out on the other side. You can always visit us at functionaldiagnosticnutrition.com, but for now, here is today's episode. All right, hello my friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. My name is Evan Transu, aka Detective Ev, and I will be your host for today's show, episode number 384 of the Health Detective Podcast. We are slowly, actually rapidly in a sense, approaching episode 400. I appreciate you guys being on. We've slowed down a little bit with podcast release just for the month of December. We still have some great episodes like the one today planned for you, but just with the holidays and stuff coming up. And then if you guys haven't realized, Christmas Eve and Christmas kind of fall on weird days this year. So it is probably a great time to be a kid. I only think about this because I have a bunch of cousins and I speak in schools. So this is like probably the best option that you could get when Christmas Eve and Christmas are on a Tuesday and Wednesday respectively, because then you also get New Year's Eve and New Year's Day on a Tuesday and Wednesday respectively. I'm like, that's amazing. You're probably just getting a 2-week break. So that's why our episodes are a little lacking. But we got an awesome guest for you guys today. I actually was the person who had the privilege of getting to talk to her prior to joining the FDN course. And now she's been involved for a bit. And she even did a webinar with us recently. So that was pretty cool. All these things come full circle. I do have one thing that I would like to talk to you guys about before we get into the actual show today. And it will explain to you my background. If you have not heard yet, FDN is doing an East Coast conference. You do not need to be an FDN graduate or an FDN trainee even to come and join us here. You can just be anyone that's interested in functional medicine or this way of thinking. It's a great opportunity to meet other FDNs. You'll get to meet myself if that's worth anything to you. Reed Davis, the founder of FDN, will be there, and Alissabeth Gaines, our education director, will be there as well. So Alissabeth will actually be speaking on the main stage, explaining FDN to people at the conference that don't know what it is. And in fact, there's probably going to be a good amount of information for those that are FDNs, because we're taking a bit of a different approach with that. I don't want to give it all away, but let's just say she's going to be sharing some interesting scientific studies around salivary hormone testing. So, of course, as nerds, we're excited for that. And then Reed and I will be doing a 90-minute business workshop. So whether you are a health coach, health practitioner, future health coach or health practitioner, or an FDN, this business workshop is going to be great for you. So we're going to give you the best stuff that we have. And Reed and I always love talking business with him because he, of course, has like more of an old school perspective. And I'm the guy that's like in the marketing funnels and using all the tech that we have in today's world. So it's cool to see kind of the similarities that we both share in business that are true when he was 20 versus now. And then there's some new stuff that I can bring to the table as well. And there's also some just old school tough love principles that everyone needs to hear. So if you would like to join us for this conference, please use this link below. It is biohackerexpo.com, and you can use code HDP, like Health Detective Podcast, code HDP at checkout for 50% off all your tickets. So how we're doing this is we're basically the biggest sponsor at this conference for the Biohacker Expo. So not only will you get to see 100 plus FDNs there, you will get to see over 1,000 health practitioners and just health enthusiasts, which we highly encourage. We want you guys to go out there and network with other individuals. Reed and I were just talking about this today. He's met he can't even count at this point the amount of people that he's met at conferences throughout his 70 years on this earth, and 50 something years in business basically at this point. One relationship can change everything for you, or it can change everything for them. And there's something that's really amazing about being able to impact someone else in that way too. But although this wasn't a conference, I always go back to this example of how I even got involved with FDN. It was just having the guts to travel across the country, get involved in these health meetups, and I met Jen Maleka, of all people, at a health meetup. And not only did it work out, somehow I'm hosting the podcast for 380 something episodes. So if you don't believe that getting to these conferences or getting to these events and shaking hands and smiling at people can't impact your life, I mean, I don't know who you're talking to, because for me, this has been everything. So we would love to see you there. Biohackerexpo.com and code HDP at checkout. We have Sandy Martin, the founder of that conference, coming on next week if you need some more details before you commit to that. All right, so apparently Alissabeth already has some fan favorites in the chat here, because I'm reading this. We haven't even introduced her yet. And we have Alissabeth is the bomb. We also have So Excited for Alissabeth. She is amazing. So let's tell you how amazing she is with her bio, and then we will get into it. So, Alissabeth Taylor has been passionate about health and wellness for over 20 years. Starting her career as a traditionally trained nurse, she shifted her focus from sick care to holistic wellness after navigating her own family's health challenges. As a mom of 3 young children, constantly battling illnesses and later facing unresolved skin rashes, food sensitivities, gut issues, and hormonal imbalances herself, Alissabeth turned to alternative health options when the conventional medical system fell short. Her personal healing journey and desire to help others led her to become a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner. Today, Alissabeth specializes in helping busy, overwhelmed women uncover the hidden causes of fatigue, weight gain, gas and bloating, and persistent skin rashes, that they might be dealing with. By utilizing functional lab tests, she addresses imbalances at their root, empowering her clients to regain energy, balance, and confidence. Welcome to the show, my friend.
I am so excited to be here.
Sometimes I just start going. I'm like, how was that 6 minutes of stuff? So thank you for all of you that bear with me through that. Let's get right into you. I know that your family was a huge reason that you got into this. So I want to word my first question correctly, because I normally ask, what were your health symptoms and what did they look like? So I don't know if you want to take the approach with your family or with you, but I am kind of curious about what the first health symptoms that were on your radar were and what did they look like? What were the first ones, I guess, that were not easily resolved by Western medicine? That might even be a more
Mhm.
interesting way to word it.
Yeah, so I mean, I have the typical history personally of the kids with ear infections and all that kind of stuff, had my tonsils and adenoids out, struggled with some hormonal issues as a teenager, but really what changed my perspective on, holistic wellness was when I had my kids. My oldest is about to be 17 on Monday, and when he, was a baby, he had a traumatic birth. He was an emergency C-section. It was literally life and death for both of us on that surgical table. So it was pretty traumatic. And then he ended up with colic and reflux. And if you've gone through like a traumatic birth and then you have to take care of that child and that child is not well, it's a lot on a new mom's plate. And so I went to the pediatrician one day. She diagnosed him with the colic and reflux, and she told me, "I'm giving you this medication for him because I trust that you're not gonna abuse it." And I was like, red flags just went off in my head. Like, why should you even be giving it to me, you know? Like, I'm no different than anybody. So that really, catapulted me into looking for alternatives for him, and that came in the arena of chiropractic care. And we had an amazing chiropractor. I took him, he was only a 6-week-old baby, so I was a little nervous about taking him to the chiropractor, but we loved our chiropractor back then. And within, I would say, 2 or 3 weeks, the nighttime like screaming fits ended, his digestion was better and everything. So it just made me more in tune, because as a mom, you want what's best for your kids. You don't want to see them suffering. And so that's kind of the catapult that took me into holistic wellness.
With the interactions that we've had, you've always struck me as kind of an open-minded person anyway. And I know that when these moms are on a mission, man, it's like game over. You guys make the best FDN practitioners, because not only will you figure out the stuff for your kids, but you will just go will this into the world and help other people. So it's kind of amazing. But I am curious, what was your perception like, especially as a conventionally trained person, right? A registered nurse. What was your perception like before this happened? Did you have an idea about anything holistic? Did you think it was kind of just this one way? Again, you don't really strike me as that person, but I'm just kind of wondering what, like, did this shift your paradigm? Did it like shatter your worldview about medicine, or what was it like?
I think that was the start of it, but, I had dabbled in little things like trying to lose weight different ways as a teenager, just looking at diet differently than everybody else did, trying to be more conscious of what I ate. So it really was it that was kind of like the turning point. I wouldn't say I was ingrained in Western medicine, but, I was traditionally trained. So I only knew what I knew, and I had to do the rest by seeking it out for myself.
Gotcha. Well, I'm so glad that that chiropractor could help you out. I love what you said when you said he was only 6 weeks or 6 months.
6 weeks old.
Okay, okay, yeah, I could totally
Yeah.
understand the hesitancy with going to a chiropractor and getting adjusted and stuff. But then I don't know if you get these. Maybe this is my bubble on Instagram and Facebook. I get these like reels now of chiropractors adjusting horses, dogs. I mean, pretty much
Oh, yeah.
anything. So apparently, this is a safe thing to do for a variety of animals at different stages of development. It kind of is an amazing thing. So this helped you think outside the box, and I think it's incredibly impactful, not only when we hear these stories, but when we experience something like this ourselves or with someone that we really care about, our kids, and we watch, wow, this was being told to me. I just watched this kid get better doing something that was not necessarily told to me by the conventional system. It really does blow a lot of people's minds. So let's jump into, if we can, your health issues, because that came a little bit later, from my understanding. So, what did yours look like? And I guess, how did you approach them? Because clearly you had this new mindset available to you prior to you dealing with your own health issues, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah, so my oldest is 17, and then my twins are 13. They were all IVF babies, and there's a lot that goes into infertility treatments. There's a lot of hormones, a lot of antibiotics, a lot of um, hyperstimulation of things, and it's a hor it's not a horrible process. I don't want to say it's horrible, but it's a lot, emotionally, physically. And I think that by the time I had all three of my kids, my body was just so depleted. So, I had turned a little more holistic with my son. I wanted to do better for my girls because I had learned, trying to build on habits and the way that I did things. And then when my girls were about 4 years old, I started breaking out in rashes all over my body. You can go on my Instagram page and actually see some of the pictures personally of the rashes that I had. And it was, on your face. It was the embarrassing places. Like I couldn't hide it. I was a teacher at one point and it was on my hands, and my students were asking, "What's wrong with your hands?" You know, and when I went through that, I did have a really good doctor that kind of did a little bit of functional testing. Like he ran a SIBO breath test and checked me for leaky gut, but everything came back normal. And then he said, go see a dermatologist or an allergist. And I did. And when I went to them, they just gave me a steroid cream. They're like, that's all you can do. I did find a little bit of chemical allergens that I could eliminate from my products in my skincare and stuff like that. But ultimately, he said, take this cream. And I said, well, what about diet? Like, could it be food sensitivities? And he said, diet has nothing to do with your skin. And again, that was like one of those light bulb moments where it's like, oh my gosh, you are so wrong. And I know that I just knew in my gut that there was something better. There was a different way of doing it. And I had to, again, search on my own for what that answer was. And, I started taking some whole food supplements that helped me because I realized I was so nutrient deficient that my skin couldn't function properly. But that wasn't enough because it didn't address the root. It kind of was a band aid, as we like to talk about band aids. It wasn't a medication, it was something holistic, but it was still a band aid. There was still a root there. And honestly, until I got to FDN and was able to run those labs on myself, I didn't know exactly what that root was. And it all stemmed in my gut and my hormones mostly. So, yeah.
I cannot. It's one thing when these people say we don't know if something's connected, but these definitive statements of there is no connection between, diet and skin, for example, that's where and you listen to the show, I try to be objective. I really do. I think most people would recognize that. But that's where I really just start to get a little upset with some of the Western medicine stuff. I mean, that's ridiculous. I am almost positive I could go on PubMed right now and just type in skin health and diet and find something that suggests that what I'm eating could lead to results, both positive and negative, in my skin, depending on what it is that I'm eating, right? Like, it doesn't even take a rocket scientist to figure out that there is some connection there. So to make such a definitive and bold statement, like there is no connection, is ridiculous. And you know exactly why I'm getting so passionate about this, because I am someone who dealt with severe cystic acne for like 9, 10 years. And I went to these dermatologists. Mine, I do believe, meant very, very well. She never necessarily said that diet doesn't have anything to do with it, although that was certainly never suggested in my protocol. We went from antibiotics to Accutane, pretty much. And I should honestly just go back at this point. I mean, they probably think I'm being ridiculous because I don't need anything right now. But like, I almost want to go back and just show her, like, I did this without any of the stuff that you recommended. I'm not trying to make fun of you or anything, or challenge you per se. But it's like, what do you think? What do you make of this? I'd love to know what she makes of this if I were to present that to her, because I don't have anything on my skin now. So yeah, for those that are unaware and maybe still curious about that, yes, if you have skin issues, not only is diet correlated with it, not all the time probably, but I would argue most of the time the skin is nothing more than a reflection of what's going on inside. I mean, I'm sure I'm missing something, right? Someone could have a reaction to something that they rubbed up against, like they could be hiking, right? So I get that, but would you back me on that? Like, do you think generally speaking the skin is most often a reflection of what's going on inside?
Yeah, I like to tell my clients that 90% of your issues are what you're eating. The rest is, the rest of your lifestyle. But in my case, I did have some sensitivities to things like lavender and like pine trees randomly. So there was a little bit of environmental allergens, but mostly it had to do with what I was putting in my body and what it was doing to my gut.
Yeah, and fair enough. That's kind of my point, though. It's like not only was
Yeah,
that statement that the dermatologist made not true, it's like I would almost argue the exact opposite. That the
right.
majority of the time, it's something linked to what
Yep.
you're doing.
Yep.
So you said you get to FDN, and that's where you really start to find some answers. We talked generally about like, hey, I found some stuff was going on in my gut that I needed to address. Let's dive into some nerdy specifics. So, what did you find specifically in your gut and in the other tests that we include in the course? When you were running this, like, what did you find to be some of the bigger root causes for you or contributing factors to this metabolic chaos you were dealing with?
Yeah, definitely a lot of metabolic chaos. So there's 5 labs that we run foundationally, and I still run those labs in my program with my clients. The biggest thing to me was there was the food sensitivity test that brought up the dairy, which I had really eliminated on my own by trial and error. And the wheat, I wasn't super good about being gluten free, but for a long time I was. That showed up as a sensitivity. Then some random things that were causing me other digestive issues, not so much the skin, but when I was doing FDN, I was dealing with a lot of like reflux and bloating and stuff like that. And then my cortisol, we always talk about high cortisol. It's kind of the buzz right now, but I actually had super low cortisol, which means that my body was just so depleted, it could not make enough cortisol to deal with, day-to-day function. I mean, I was taking naps every afternoon because I had no energy, didn't want to get up in the morning, that type of thing. And then as far as my gut goes, my GI map was, um, I wouldn't say it's a wreck because I have seen worse GI maps, but for me, it was depleted. There was like no good bacteria there to support preventing bad guys from coming in. Um, and then I had super low secretory IgA, which is our first line of defense from the outside world into our body. And that was low, which showed that there was a lot of inflammation and other things. And even though I had all these rashes, you would think, okay, well, my histamine's probably really high. And at some point, I had thought that I was triggered by a lot of histamine foods like collagen and apple cider vinegar, anything that had histamines, I would break out in a rash from that. But surprisingly, on my test, my histamine levels were super low. So, yeah, those were the main things that stood out. I did have H. pylori, which is a very common bacterial infection in our stomach. And I did have a parasite pop up, which is unusual, but it explained a lot of those digestive symptoms I was having as well. So overall, there were answers. Like I finally saw, and even now compared to 10 years ago when I started all these rashes and everything, it gave me answers as to what possibly had been going on since that time. It's not like all these things pop up overnight. It's this long-term downhill cascade that we call it. So,
I I was kind of wondering about that, and I hope this is okay to ask because I mean you've listened to the show. I do ask personal questions sometimes, so
yeah.
if we need to skip over it, we can. But you had mentioned IVF, and I mean, it takes two to tango, right? So there's two
Yeah.
contributing factors that go into, a baby not being able to be produced. But just in your personal opinion, knowing what you know now and seeing the things that you did see on the labs, from your understanding, do you think some of these hidden stressors may have contributed to whatever happened that led to you choosing something like IVF?
Ours was actually male factor, so I
Okay.
was, okay. But I do think that the repercussions of going through those processes were that it just depleted my body.
Oh my gosh, got it. So it's almost like the opposite, right? So fair enough. And
Yeah.
I appreciate that we recognize that, though. It's something I always try to, when this comes up, state on the
Yeah.
show. I think for some reason, I shouldn't even say for some reason, I kind of get it, but I think it's a little silly. We almost always look to the woman when there is a
Yeah.
pregnancy issue. And I'm like, are you guys forgetting that you guys
2
learned
people.
this stuff in sex ed when you were kids, right?
Yeah.
There's two people
Yeah.
that are involved in the uh, producing of this child and this human being. So there are many things that can go wrong with the sperm, especially as the man ages, or depending on the chemicals that they're exposed to, what's their testosterone at, right? So there's a lot of things. So okay, um, interesting and kind of ironic that the IVF, which normally, not always on the show, but normally would be something that's going on hormonally with the woman, ends up actually being probably one of your biggest contributors and stressors that led to all this other stuff. So thank God you found FDN and these other
Yeah.
functional methods.
Yeah.
When you were learning these things in FDN then and getting the lab results back, I'm kind of curious what was going through your mind because again, you're a trained person, right? You're not just someone that's coming from a completely separate career. You're a trained nurse, so you have this medical background. In addition, you have already been exposed to the functional medicine side of things. It's not like you were being unconvinced of stuff. You knew that this was something that had validity and that it made sense. But I am curious, when you were looking at the lab results for the first time for yourself, were you still surprised by some of the stuff that came up? And it's not even a negative surprise necessarily. You already brought up the idea that it was validating to see this stuff. You didn't use that exact word, but that's kind of what you meant, right? It was validating to see that there was something wrong that you could work on. But I'm curious, was some of this stuff like surprising? Had you ever even thought about these things being issues for you?
I mean, I kind of instinctively knew that I had leaky gut. Like, every symptom that I had, it was like a no-brainer. I just couldn't get anybody to diagnose me with a condition, you know? Um, so I guess it was a little surprising, but it really was just validating, like you said. But I will say that I have had to unlearn a lot of things that I learned traditionally, just because there is a difference in what we do now and, what I learned traditionally. And actually, it's not even so much as a difference as it's so much deeper, it's not surface level. So,
Can we touch on some specifics with that? Because we're a show that obviously promotes that, hey, Western medicine has its time and place, functional medicine has its time and place. But to imply that you either needed to unlearn something or go deeper almost implies that some of the stuff that you learned was, at least by your conclusions now, maybe not fully correct. So, are there any specific examples that come to mind of something that was maybe hard to unlearn? Because I think that's some of the biggest challenges that people have if they are coming from a Western background. I look at myself at, 21 years old when I was going through FDN, and certainly I'd been indoctrinated just in general, the way people are indoctrinated by the general school system, and media and stuff. Like I had beliefs about Western medicine, but I didn't need to unlearn anything like you. So I'm kind of curious, like, what were some of the challenging ones or the biggest aha moments specifically in terms of like unlearning and relearning?
honestly, I can't think of it. Those were things that I dealt with when I was going through the course, but um, I think about just the lack of information, like let's talk about labs, for example. If I go get my blood work done, if it's in the lab range, it's normal, whether I feel really good or I feel like crap. So, knowing that there was kind of a different range in even blood work to where if you're in this narrower optimal range, you feel your best, your body's functioning at its best. Doctors don't necessarily, unless you find like maybe a naturopath or a functional medicine doctor, they're not necessarily going to look at labs the same way as far as blood goes. So, just seeing that there's more to the picture. It's like I had missing pieces of the puzzle back then. Um, And it only went so deep. This just really drills deep into the body. It gets to the root of the issue. And the way we do things in FDN is we correlate everything. So we're not just looking at, I'm going to a heart doctor. I'm not just looking at my heart in FDN. I'm looking at how is my heart correlating with my digestion, my energy levels, all those other systems of the body. So we have that holistic approach where we don't isolate things. And I think that's the biggest thing. I learned systems in the nursing school. Now I look at systems in the view of how is that one system reacting with the rest of the body.
Yeah, well, no, that's a great example because I'm thinking, is it fair to say when we think about something like blood work, right? We're looking for these things to be either out of range too low or out of range too high, at which time we most likely, depending on what ranges we're talking about, can make some type of diagnosis, and then that diagnosis has its insurance code, and that insurance code has
Mhm.
certain treatments that we can do with medications or whatever. So is it kind of fair to say that one of the biggest differences between these philosophies was that Western almost by definition has to wait until something is literally wrong and diagnosable. Whereas FDN, it's not that you didn't have stuff going wrong. We did pick that up, but FDN could almost be used preventatively if someone was smart enough to run this before they had any symptoms. In reality, like if you run a lot of Western medicine tests, especially something as sensitive as blood work, um, or I almost wouldn't even call it sensitive. I'd probably say the opposite because I do think you need to be pretty banged up to to really start getting certain markers out of range. Like you're not really doing that well by an FDN perspective. So it's kind of like, is that one of the problems with the medical system, the fact that they're almost waiting for something to be truly wrong before they do anything, whereas like an FDN could find something preventatively?
Yeah. I mean, you go to the doctor every year, you get the same lab work done every year. Nothing's wrong until it's wrong, right? And then they can diagnose you. But what I look for in blood work is the trends. Year to year, are we moving up or down that scale towards, like what you said, sickness or disease? But I'm not looking to diagnose anybody with that. I'm just looking to say, okay, hey, you are showing signs of insulin resistance. If you don't get this under control now, you might end up with diabetes down the road. And you can change that. So, yes, I'm definitely on the preventive side now.
I'll never forget my friend. She did share this publicly. That's why I'll use her name. But my friend Carly, when I was first getting into this stuff, this must have been like 2018, like FDN type stuff, that is. And she had expressed to me, I was talking about thyroid stuff. She had expressed to me that the labs were actually running her antibodies and they were running her TSH. And every year, she was a few years older than me. So every year from high school on, they were running these labs. This has been, I don't know, it was 6 or 7 years of running labs every year on her at that point. And every time without fail, you could see the antibodies getting a little more elevated. You could see the TSH being a little more off. But they said to her, until you have something like, right here, there's nothing that we can do, which just from a common sense perspective sounds so ridiculous that we're all sitting here together. We're watching this trend. It does not take a statistician to figure out that this is a problem, right? You don't have to be a genius to know that this is obviously getting worse. But the only answers that system is equipped with, or equips someone like you with as a nurse, is to wait until something actually goes awry. Whereas we're thinking, well, wait. If for 5, 6 years this has been getting worse for me, what's happening? Like, what is causing this? That's allowing this to get worse and worse. And I think because when you hear that again, it sounds ridiculous. Why would someone not do something? And the only conclusion that I can come to, and I'd like you to please correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like you almost, to truly participate as a Western medicine practitioner, there almost has to be a belief at some point, whether you acknowledge it consciously or not, that the body must just be inherently flawed. Because if you didn't believe that, you would not wait over every single year as the body got worse and worse and worse on the labs for something to happen. If you believed that there was something that you could change, you would go change it, right? So whether or not that's like a conscious belief of Western medicine, I'm talking about more in practice now. Like, do you kind of think Western medicine acts as almost like all these disease states must just be inherent flaws or genetic defects in the body? Because otherwise, I feel like we would be engaging in more prevention, right? Or am I missing something?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It's your age, your gender, you hit a certain, point in your life and you're destined to get these diseases, but that's really not the case. And honestly, I believe that there's an innate ability of your body to heal itself. if you know what to do and how to take care of your body. So that's what I work on my clients with.
Well, that's what I want to talk about next. I want to kind of progress into what you decided to do with FDN. But I'd also like to give yourself even some more credit there, because you said you believe that the body has an innate healing ability. Now, we could, I guess, argue about how far that goes, but what I can say right from the get-go, just because other people don't always think like us, I know this is probably something obvious to you, a paper cut, I have never had to tell my body to fix that. That's innate healing. This is not woo woo, right? Like my body gets a cut, and somehow I wake up and every day it gets a little bit better. And then there's a scab, and then all of a sudden, wow, I never even knew I had a paper cut there. And more dramatically is something like a broken bone. I don't know what the average person is believing. Like that cast that you put on at the hospital, the cast is just making sure that the bone regrows in place. There's not some magic chemical being released by the cast that is like miracle grow for your bone. The body is the one that was able to acknowledge, hey, in that soccer game, you broke your femur or whatever. It was terrible. We acknowledge that something is wrong here. And so all of a sudden, the body's able to send the troops and the energy to that place to fix it. We take these things for granted, I think. At least I know I can speak for myself. I did, because we grow up with that. And like it's normal. Like a kid breaks their arm or something at basketball or whatever, and they were in a cast, everyone signs it. It's not a big thing, but it's like that is amazing that our body is wired or designed in such a way, whatever you subscribe to, that it can recognize this idiot just broke a bone and we're going to fix it for this individual. I mean, that's kind of amazing. So I don't know that it's a belief that there's an innate healing ability. I think it's inherently obvious. I think the argument would be, yeah, how far does this go? And to what diseases can we do that with, right?
Yeah. And I think that people just don't even think about how awesome their body is, like what it can do for you. So, yeah.
So moving on, then you got through FDN. At what point, first of all, did you decide that you wanted to do this when you grow up? Like, when did you decide that you wanted to do this as a career? Did you know that even prior to joining FDN, or was that something that you concluded during?
Well, so I had my nursing degree, and then when my kids were going through their health issues, I became a Dr. Sears health coach. And that was great because it gave me more insight into more the diet and the nutrition side of things. It didn't really um, give me as much as FDN does. So when I did that, I had some interest, but ultimately it wasn't enough. I knew there was more that had to complete the picture. And that's why I chose FDN, because the lab work, like we need something that quantifies what is going on. Symptoms are messengers, right? They tell us that something's going on in our body. But if we can't get a diagnosis because we're not far enough down that road of illness, then what can we do? Well, we can run these functional labs, we can look at what's going on, and we can address things before they happen. So,
Absolutely. All right. So, who do you choose to work with now? Not that FDNs can't help most people. Unfortunately, there's no shortage of people that need an FDN's help. But as FDNs, we kind of focus on a specific niche, just from a marketing perspective and also purely an interest perspective. So, who is it that you prefer to help now?
well, I will help anybody, of course, but I love helping busy moms, moms that are stressed out because either they can't figure out what's going on with their kids, or they can't take care of their kids because whatever's going on with them. So that's really my niche, is the busy mom that's frustrated with her health issues, is not getting answers, is not feeling heard, is not given that validation that something is wrong. She's being told that it's all in your head, you know, take Xanax, take whatever, let's give you a chill pill. Yeah, those are the people that I love working with.
Yeah, it's kind of the medical gaslighting is a little bit insane. Like, Xanax is a heck of a drug, right? Any
Yeah.
benzodiazepine or the SSRIs. And it's like, not only do these people get invalidated for what they're dealing with, I do mean specifically women. There are legitimate studies to back up that women are overrepresented in people that are told that it's all in their head. And what's crazy is the studies also show that female doctors do it to women too. That's the craziest
Mhm.
part. So that is real though, and that actually happens. And then so again, it's one thing to invalidate it. It's another thing to say, hey, here's your freaking benzodiazepine, a very powerful drug that is highly addictive and has some of the worst withdrawals in the world of any drug class if you take it too long. but we'll just give you that to chill out while you're actually dealing with real stuff, right? So I would imagine that many of the people that end up working with you kind of go through a similar experience to what you and I have felt, where there must be pretty incredible validation when they do get these lab results back, right?
Yeah, yeah, I'll give you an example if you want me
Sure.
to. I had, a 13-year-old that came to me, her mom knew that something wasn't right. This child couldn't breathe through her nose, hadn't been able to smell anything since she could remember, had eczema, those types of things. Mom knew something was wrong. They were only offering nasal surgery. Let's go in and scrape everything out. Mom didn't want to do that. And when we got her GI map back and we reviewed that, she said, I feel so validated. Like, I knew there was something wrong. You showed me what was wrong. And the amazing thing about this child is within 2 weeks of starting an elimination diet and on some targeted supplements for her gut, she could do a sinus rinse. She'd never been able to do that. It wouldn't even pass through her nasal cavity at all. And she smelled her sister's perfume. Like, her life has changed. Her testimonial is actually on my Instagram as well, but she's one of my favorite testimonials. And just for me as a practitioner, hearing the mom say thank you for making me not feel crazy about my child, that's a big deal to me.
If you guys have any questions over the last 15 minutes for Alissabeth, this would be a great time from the audience perspective to ask questions. I'll always prioritize yours at this end part of the show. I wanted to ask, though, because, when I asked who you serve, you kind of talked about these busy moms. That's more of a class of person, right? Which is totally fine as a niche. I'm wondering, do you tend to attract right now moms with certain types of health issues or moms with kids with certain types of health issues, or are you getting a wide range of people?
It's mostly in the gut hormones and skin, and it's actually not as many skin clients as I had anticipated when I set up my business. It's more the gut. These women are coming to me with reflux, gas, bloating. Some of them will eat a meal and look 6 months pregnant by the end of the day. Very like self-conscious issues. Um, Fatigue is a big one. So it's a lot of different things, really.
Can I, well, I want to dive deeper into that. This is kind of a cheesy thing to bring up, but I have to bring it up. So, just to be clear about that food belly thing that we're talking about, you're acknowledging and stating that you do not think bloating to that degree, or maybe even really to any significant degree, is normal, right? You are arguing that that is not normal, although it's common.
Yeah, it is very common, but I mean, I even experienced it. I remember being on trips, and having to go back to the hotel room early because I ate something and I needed to go and curl up into a ball. Like, feeling that way after you eat food is not normal. You should feel energized. You should feel, like you can go out and do what needs to be done. So bloating is definitely, yeah, there's something there. That's a symptom. That's your body telling you that your body doesn't like something or something is reacting negatively.
Yeah, I just had to bring that up only because I don't know if this is happening in other generations. It very well may be. In my generation, and listen, dude, I'm a nice person. You know that. I'm not making fun of anyone, but sometimes I just see this stuff and I'm like, wow, we're screwed. There's a lot of influencers, particularly in the fitness space. I love y'all. You look great, but just saying that their whole narrative is like normalizing that, right? Like they're like, oh no, this is normal, girl. Like, stop judging yourself for it. Okay, I absolutely agree. We should not be judging people for anything. Fair enough. I certainly wouldn't want to be judged. I've messed up a million times in my life. But the idea that these people are now going online and like showing their food belly and saying, oh yeah, this is normal, just because I deal with it all the time. I'm like, whoa, like, no, it is not normal just because you deal with it all the time and still overall have a decent level of fitness. So, we could beat a dead horse with that because I've talked about that a million times on this show, but it's like that community seems to equate fitness with health. It is a indication of health. I don't know many 90-year-olds that are running marathons or lifting extreme amounts of weights, fine, but that is not the only thing. And if every meal that you eat, Miss Fitness Influencer, with all due respect, results in a food belly, that is not normal, and that is probably something to look into, and we'd love to have you in the FDN course. All right, so I see some questions here. We'll start with Tracy, and then Bill, I got you next. Tracy said, do you feel like most of the symptoms, even with skin issues, are originating from the gut?
That's a good question. I would say yes, but it's not always from the gut. Like I said in my story, I had the sensitivities to chemicals. So it's also the things that we're putting on our skin, that we're washing our hair with, that we're cleaning our house with. Those are all toxin. They have toxins in them, and they act as stressors on our body. So yes, there are certain bacteria that are directly correlated with the skin. Um, and I would say that 90% of what I see in my skin clients is their gut, but there are some external sources as well.
Sure. Bill, hello. I'm sorry, Bill, if I'm remembering this incorrectly. I think I saw Bill on a nurse's webinar that we actually did the other day. So thanks for being here. He said, I'm joining late and you may have already covered it, but how long did it take you to transition from traditional nursing to full time as an FDN coach? How have you marketed yourself? Been an RN for 34 years. So this is a kind of a fun business question. I could be wrong, Elizabeth. I don't even know. Are you a full time FDN? So I don't know if there's assumptions there, but let's dive into that. How has this transition look?
So actually, when my first child was born, he we had some scheduling issues with the staffing at the hospital, and I basically quit because they were overworking me, and I wanted to be home with my baby that needed me. So I haven't actually worked in the field. I've kept up all my certifications, my continuing education, and everything like that. I have actually been doing FDN for a year in January. And yeah, it's full time as I'm raising my kids and dealing with my family at home. So
That's awesome. And Bill, for the sake of being transparent here, because I don't want to create unrealistic expectations for anyone, not that a year is not realistic, but you did mention that you were a Sears Health coach before. So did you have clients that have overlapped and helped from that? Like, were you starting really from, day one? How should I say that? Were you starting from nothing when you graduated FDN, or did you already have some residual clients and some experience with the business side prior?
I would say I had one client that came
Okay.
to me from coaching before, and she's a client now with FDN. But most of my clients are brand new. And as far as marketing myself, I just share what I know and love on social media, and it draws people. And I just want to tell people that there's another option. You have other options. So.
Thank you so much. And thanks, Bill. I think to your point there about sharing what matters to you and the things that light you up and how it just brings people, there will probably be a day where there's enough of us doing that. I don't just mean FDNs, I just mean these health practitioners in general, where maybe it needs to be something more than that. I don't think we're anywhere close to that. And that's totally my same advice, Elizabeth. I think it makes total sense because there's so. Guys, if you just look at the stats, it's like 40 something percent of people in America alone. I don't know the stats for other countries offhand. So sorry, I do recognize we have international listeners. Don't worry, I got you guys. But I just know the stats for America. And like 48% of people have a chronic disease. 1 in 2. There is no way you could argue to me that these people are getting helped. I can't even argue that the majority of those people know that there's other options. So sometimes it's as simple as you got your few hundred Facebook friends or a couple hundred followers on Instagram, which most of us have just by default. Not everyone, I get that. And there's still other ways to do it, even if you don't have that. But most of us just have that from being a normal person in society nowadays. If you just start sharing your story, you are walking around knowing by definition that half of the people that you are friends with on Facebook or have as followers on Instagram have these conditions in some way or another statistically, right? Just because you don't know that they have it doesn't mean that they don't. The stats don't lie. Like these people have this stuff. So I'm not surprised that just being authentic and sharing your story has helped with that. So I think that's a very powerful way to just get started is just talk about what you love and talk about what you know. Do you have any other tips for that? Or has it really been just that straightforward as sharing this stuff?
Well, I was going to say, I went into this thinking, oh, I'm going to have a Instagram. I'm going to get followers. I'm going to get these people I don't know that are coming to me. And it's been the complete opposite. All the clients that I have been somebody I know personally, whether it's somebody that I see on a daily basis or, know that lives in a different state, or somebody that they've referred me to. So my goal is to have a referral-based business. And that's truly what it has been so far. I love social media, but I also hate social media. So
Well, thank you for pointing that out, though, because I do think this is a common misconception for people, and they believe that it's like a requirement to go, not even just be an FDN, but any type of these like certification, online certification practitioners. And then, of course, it's like they look at us and they're thinking, well, what are you guys doing right now? You're on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn doing a podcast. So do you have to do this? And I would only say I would never even argue that social media is a requirement. I would never say that, but because it didn't exist forever and there were still businesses that worked out very well. um,
Yeah.
I would say it's a highly advisable thing for people that, like, if you have a goal of like, hey, oh, I'm going to go make $1 million in a business each year and I'm going to hire 6 practitioners. Yeah, you're probably going to have to learn to do that. That's not what most of our practitioners are shooting for. And as the saying goes, like, the more money you have, the more problems start occurring. Like, there's a whole different level of stress that comes for these individuals that I watch that are nuts enough to run these businesses where they're hiring practitioners and they're relying on them for their bills to be paid and stuff like that. You can make an awesome, honest living doing this as a solo practitioner with maybe a virtual assistant or something, and you could even actually beat the income that you had as a nurse, which is insane and so like kind of cool because you have all these people that are referring other individuals to you, right? So by definition they loved what they spent because they're telling their friends and family about it. So you can make great income doing this, and it doesn't need to be the most complicated business in the world. So I'm so happy for you that you're already at this point now that you are getting these referrals, because those are the easiest people generally to talk to on the phone. When your friend tells you about something that they spent, a few $1,000s on, and they loved it so much that they believe that you should do the same thing, those calls are like simple. It's like I'm literally just talking to them to see if I can help them. If I know I can help them, the transaction's pretty much as good as done, and then you create another referral from that person in the future. So I think that's
I
great.
will Can
Yeah.
I add something to that?
Please.
I will say that the people that have come to me are literally at the end of their rope. They've tried everything. One of my new clients was referred by a client who hasn't even done her lab work yet. But this new client is so desperate for answers and help that she was a yes, like before we even really talked, honestly. So, social media is just a platform for you to share your story, for you to share what you're doing with other people, and I embrace it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, we could do a whole podcast on that. There's consumers and creators on social media. I consume all the time. I'm not saying I'm not a consumer too, but if you're smart, you're making sure that you're creating more than you're consuming. That stuff is so powerful. It's not even funny. Jen has a question here, and Jen, I love having you on these lives and webinars. I just swear, if you are the person that ends up getting an extension on this course because you participate so much with us on here, then I'm going to be mad. But if you finish the course in time and you still join us for all these, then I'm so happy to have you on all this stuff. Jen just signed up for the course recently, Elizabeth, but she's still on all their stuff. So I think it's awesome, though. Jen had asked, though, how many hours a week do you devote to your FDN practice? I'm a fellow mom with children still at home as well.
Yeah, I will say if she just joined the course that I did a lot of nights, long hours just to get through the course. Right now, we also homeschool. I don't know if I said that earlier. So my mornings, and I've got a child that's in dual enrollment, which means I have to take him to a college class too because he's still not driving. Um, so usually I put in about 4 or 5 hours a day. Some days more because I do schedule calls during that time. But of course, my kids are older, so they're a little bit more able to self sustain. They can cook and do their schoolwork and all that kind of stuff. So it really just varies on the day. I try to take Fridays off for me, though, because I want a day to do my own self care while I'm trying to help others do theirs.
Awesome. And Jen said one more lesson and she's done module 2. Well, I got no argument for that. Fair enough, Jen. We're glad to have you on the podcast. Thanks for participating. Um, Yeah, and what's cool about the FDN thing is like, and this is true for any type of business that's online, so it's not just exclusive to FDN, but I think people really don't realize how much flexibility they can have. What you want to do, guys, is you want to reverse engineer stuff. And this is a separate podcast too, but you start with what do I need each year? It's okay. You can't pour from a cup that is empty. You cannot pour from a cup that is empty. And most of us are natural healers. We're natural helpers. We will give ourselves away to save another person. That's great, but you can actually save more people if you serve yourself first. Not selfishly, but just because, again, if you're just dumping out the cup, the first person that you work with, it's not going to work for very long. So the first thing you need to do is figure out, what do I need income-wise? What do I need peace and time-wise? And then you reverse engineer that. So if you're someone that says, hey, I need 70K a year minimum, and I only want to work, 3 hours a day, Monday through Friday. Believe it or not, that's possible. But how that gets shaped and how that's done for you might look very different than someone who has a goal of hitting, $250,000 a year and is willing to work, 40 or 50 hours a week. So you start with what you need to be able to serve people at the highest level and actually do this work and get excited about it. And then we reverse engineer all that. So we'll have a podcast for that, I'm sure. Bill said, I'm looking forward to learning about all the business parts. It gets me excited. I'm loving learning about FDN, but the business part excites me too. Yeah, I think that's a natural progression for a lot of us because, like Alissabeth, I'm sure, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, business probably had to be relatively new for you, right? Until the FDN thing.
Yeah, I hadn't had any business training before, and, like, even Dr. Sears, they didn't do anything business related, so I did business school, and that was helpful, but it's still like, ugh, that I'd rather just help people get well. If somebody else run the business, I'll just help the people get well.
That laugh was I know that laugh. So I will just say I get it. And because most people, similarly to me talking about everyone kind of being these healers and helpers getting into this, most people that get into this do not have a natural business thing. That's why, I mentioned this in the beginning, shameless plug again. If you guys join us in Miami, Reed and I are so happy to talk about this because that's one thing that Reed and I have in common. We actually have a scary amount in common. We both got the motorcycles. I copied the beard and stuff. We're getting a little too similar. But one of the things is too, Reed was a business person before he was a health person. And I think that's why FDN works so well. And I think that's why we're able to help shape practitioners to be able to do stuff because it is amazing to learn from someone who only has their heart in the right place and that's the only thing they have. But business is business. And there are certain rules that you have to play, and it's a game in and of itself. So it's nice to learn from someone like Reed that, yes, he started FDN at like I think late 40s, early 50s, and he's 70 now, but there was still, multiple decades of his life where he was self-employed doing other things and applied those skills to here. So we pick up a lot of that from Reed. It's great. Alissabeth, with our time coming to a close here, one thing I would love to ask you is where people can find you if they would like to work with you. And then just to reiterate, if someone tuned in late or maybe they were driving while listening to this, not that you should be watching a video while driving, but if you were listening, you're someone that serves busy moms. So whether it's the moms themselves or the kids that might have some mystery health symptoms, you serve both of those clientele. So where can they find you if they'd like to work with you?
I'm Alissabeth Taylor Wellness, website, Facebook, Instagram.
Awesome. I will get your website shared right here for you. All right. You have listened to the podcast before. Let's see if you've
Yeah,
listened all the way to the end of one of these things and
I
gotten through
have.
50 minutes of Ev. Um, my signature question for you, my friend, is if you could wave a magic wand and you could get all of our viewers and listeners to do just one thing for their health, whether that's start to do one thing or stop doing one thing, what is the one thing that this RN turned FDN does?
I've been waiting to answer this for a long time. And it's be your own advocate. Speak up for yourself. If you know something's not right, keep trying to find answers because there is a reason why you're dealing with what you've got going on.
You know what? I don't have a perfect memory with this stuff. I think that one or a variation of that's only been said like two or three times at the end of any podcast throughout almost 400 episodes. And I love that you said that, especially for the ladies out there. And again, I'm going off stats. I'm not just saying my opinion. It's like, no, unfortunately, we do still have a system where women that are dealing with certain symptoms are statistically more likely to get told that it's in their
Mm.
head. So yes, go to Western medicine first. Talk to them. Be responsible. No one here is saying don't do that. But when something doesn't make sense, you have a right to get a second, third, fourth, fifth opinion, or take a different path. And that is someone who is a nurse saying that. That's not just me. That is someone who actually has Western medicine credentials, if you will, saying that you need to be an own advocate for yourself. There are no perfect people in Western medicine either, right? They make mistakes all the time. I think that's like the third leading cause of death in America. So you're not being arrogant or being overly confident to advocate for yourself. You're possibly saving your life and, at the very least, greatly impacting your life in a positive way, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So Jen said, thank you guys so much. If you guys would be so kind, if you loved Alissabeth's information or you dislike her, that's okay too. Please drop a thank you in the chat below. I will guess that we're going to get some thank yous here because you had fans before you even said a word today. I'm not sure how you pulled that off, but that's awesome. I can't blame them. And we will see you guys soon. Again, the podcast schedule is a little flaky and a little bit different for the next few weeks just with the holidays and stuff. But remember, we always have audio releases. Those are always consistent. They are backlogged compared to the YouTube channel, but they are always consistent Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. We look forward to seeing you guys soon on another live. And Alissabeth, thank you so much for finally getting on the podcast with me.
Yeah, thanks so much.